Hi there, welcome to another of my little videos. Today I'm planning on painting digitalis, otherwise known as foxgloves. And this is my Reader's Digest book of plants and flowers. It's seen better days, but that's what we're going to try and paint in a very loose style today. Before I ever, although I like to paint loose, before I ever contemplate painting in that way, I like to study the way that a flower's made up. And this is how I normally do it. This is one I did of a hollyhock. There's a few more on there. And this is how I would start the process. Let's just do it on here. This is a lamy pen and a water brush. So this is just plain water in here, and these come in various sizes. So the way that this is made up is that the flowers kind of, so it's all on a, if you like, a central stem, and then at the top we have these little buds waiting to come out. I like to know whether these are opposite each other or they're kind of, and they're getting bigger as they come lower down before they start to flower. And I would normally just use my water brush to just soften this. And you can also do some kind of reverse painting with it. Don't know if you can see that. Let me zoom in on this. You should be able to see that now. And then what I would do is add colour to this, just to give me an idea of the strength of colour. This is just a very pale pink. And then these flowers get bigger and they kind of grow in a downward overlapping direction like this. And they get bigger as they come down, and they're kind of a trumpet kind of shape. So that's me adding some colour, and then I can add some pen work, so they will be very dark in here. And then they would be very light in here, so I can reverse paint around these and just leave that little white area. So that's how I would approach a loose painting. I need to understand the flower first. Let's paint some here. So I've got that basis of kind of understanding. It goes very dark in here before I even attempt it. So I'll just set myself up and then we'll paint it in a loose style. Okay, so welcome back. So I'll just run through my equipment that I've got here. Sorry if there's a bit of background noise. The traffic's busy today. Everybody's gearing up for the season before the road gets closed, so it's all a bit frantic out there. This is the White Boat Studio in Sozopol, and from here I run live feeds and art holidays, and also invite guest tutors. This time I'm going to paint kind of back to front. On one of the paintings I did of fuchsias, I started with the central items, but I'm going to paint a little bit of background first. So just to run through my equipment, this is the dish that I use. It's just an old bit of cloth. Let me just zoom out and then you can see. Should be right there. So I've got a dish where I always keep my brushes all ready. and this is a damp sponge, a dirty old cloth, some tissue obviously. This is a water pot with a natural sea sponge in, and I'll be using that. There's a water spray here, this is just the garden variety. Various brushes, toothbrushes, flat brushes, just a kind of variety. Needle point brush, a dagger, which I love, and 2 pots of water, one basically for washing my brushes out, and the other one for the paint. I've already pre-sprayed these dishes that I use. These are Tintoretto artist quality watercolours, and I've got various purples, greens and pinks, and I'll probably just do a couple of stems. So I'm going to start with the background. So first thing I'm going to do is, this is Bockingford 300 gram rough paper. I don't know if you can see the texture on this, and I use this generally most of the time, and it's just been taped down with masking tape to an MDF board, which is rough on one side and I think it's got melamine on the back, and as you can see I use this for sketching when I'm teaching. That's the paper. So I'm going to splash this and spray it to start with. So I'll just get my sprayer and give that a rough old spray, probably more towards the bottom than the top. And then I'm going to use various round brushes to kind of indicate where these flowers might be. This is purely experimental. I haven't had a go at this before, so it'll either work or it won't. The thing to bear in mind is it's just a piece of paper. I'm not precious about that. It's you know, the people that add value to this humble piece of paper are the people that may end up buying the painting. So I'm just putting some kind of small splodges of water at the top, getting bigger as we go a bit further down. And I've pre-mixed my colours, and let's start with the flowers actually instead of the background. So in with a small brush, give it a good mix. The paint should be the consistency of milk, and there's obviously various kinds of milk. It goes from 0.1 skinny milk, I call it, right up to double cream. Now you can test the strength. You can either use a test piece of paper, so just on the back of an old failed painting, you can test the strength of this colour on here, or if you just drag the paint up the dish. I don't know if you can see this, but can you see how it holds together under the paintbrush? So that would be kind of not gold top, but certainly silver top milk. So it's holding together there. And if you add water to this, so I'll spray this to make it weaker. So with watercolour paint, you add water to make things lighter, and you add paint to make things darker. And the colours on these foxgloves are actually quite delicate. This one goes from white to a pinky colour, but this one is quite strong in colour. So I'll be trying to paint those 2 different varieties. I've sprayed my brush here, and it's important that those beads of water don't go into my paint now or into my painting. So now I've made this weaker, and you can see now it's a lot more delicate, more like the colour in the painting. So I'm going to use downward sweeps. So wash your brush out first, right to the bottom of the pot, and then wipe it on your tissue. And then that's perfect for picking up the paint. It picks up the paint by what they call capillary action. And if you put a dry brush into this, it doesn't kind of soak it up as much as if it was just slightly moist. But if it's too moist, you end up with cauliflowers and blooms on the painting, but I'm actually going to be encouraging those today. I've got a better thing about them at the moment. So the paints, the paper's buckled up slightly. I don't know if you can see this, but it's kind of if you can see where I've splashed it. And the paper will shrink back down when it's as it's drying. So into the paint, and then I'm just going to touch these small flowers at the top, and kind of overlapping. I'm using a scraping motion as we come further down, and these are going to get stronger in colour. There's one up there, if it disappears off. And they're kind of trumpet shaped. Now what you'll see here is that where it's hit a damp edge, you get these lovely effects where it all goes spidery. It's also important. And if it's dry, like this section here, you actually end up with a hard edge. So I'm just dragging this down. I'll have some coming out at different angles. The thing with nature is try not to have a pattern emerge. So if you see a pattern, can you see that this one looks very much like this one? So I would change something here. Make one of them slightly bigger. So I'm just continuing now. I'm still using this small brush, and you can see that these trumpets are getting bigger as we're getting lower down, and I'm leaving gaps in between them. And now I'm going to mix the paint a little stronger, so there's a bit more pigment going in there. So we're going from kind of skinny milk to a little thicker. You find that if you paint with the side of the brush, you really can't control what happens to it. If you use the point of the brush like a pencil, you end up painting very laboriously. I'm going to soften some of these edges, so just with a moist brush. Now the dark centres are going to be even stronger, so I'm going to mix some of this purple up quite strongly. So the paint is still very moist. You can usually tell if it's ready to accept another wash because it's still shiny. A bit of pinky in that. Looking a bit like my hollyhocks. I think they're having a bit of a identity crisis. Who cares? It's just painting. So you can see I've copied that there. It's part of human nature. And whilst that is still doing its thing, I'm actually going to create some dry spots on the bottom of each flower. They kind of go down to a bit of a point, like, I'm not going to put a lot of emphasis on the upper ones, but certainly on the lower ones I will. So they kind of, see the drip on my pen brush? So they come down to a kind of this shape. to do too many. You've only got to suggest a few, and then the viewer will fill in the blanks. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a combination of my tissue to create these dry spots. I'm just using the corner of the tissue there, varying the angle and shape. What happens is, when you do this, it bleeds back in, so I'm not going to use that corner now. Just going to use a different corner. This one's a bit heavy, so let's have that. So just keep changing your angle. And then let's have a little bit of sponge work a bit higher up. And just dragging back into that kind of trumpet. Again, this has now got paint on it, so turn to a clean edge. And it's starting to look a little like those foxgloves. And now some really strong paint. I'm going to do this in a combination because I've mopped this area here. It will actually be quite dry now, so it'll be still slightly moist, and as I work up into that area, this is just with a rigger. It's actually a nail art brush, and it's a bit definite there, so the tip is just to blob it with your finger. It's nice to get some definition. And what you can also do is, if you've got something that you like, you can actually put it on your finger and then copy it somewhere else, if it works. Yeah, it's just there, very vague. We'll add some darks in there. Let's just change to a different brush. This is an Alvaro Castanet needlepoint brush, which is beautiful. I find it's even darker there, it's even more accurate than using a rigger. And now I'm going to introduce some of those pinks into these areas above the purple dots. And I'm going to drag them into the flower. A bit foxglove-ish. Just add some darks to the bottoms of these top flowers. Again, it's still slightly wet. This is the curse of the left-handers club. I was told that I would never get a job as a graphic designer, which I wanted to do when I left school, because I was left-handed. I also was thrown out of a calligraphy class for the same reason. The teacher got me to one side. No, I think he did it very publicly and said, I can't teach you because I'm right-handed. So I had to go away and teach myself calligraphy from books. So I think it's looking a bit foxglove-ish now. Now I want to be careful that I don't lose these lovely shapes, so I'm just going to add some actually clean water, and I'll allow that to bleed in places, but basically I want to leave some hard edges. So we're reverse painting around this, and we're just going to add some greens to it now. So in here I've got a combination of tube greens, if you like. There's sap green in there, and there's also hooker's green, and there's some also, one of my favourite greens is gambos mixed with ultramarine. So that dish looks a little bit dusty in there, so let me just clean this out and start again. talk amongst yourselves. Okay, let's start again. So I'll just add some water. If you spray it helps to just loosen the pigment. I don't like to use tube greens really, but I want this to be quite delicate, this green. So this is ultramarine, this is gamboge. If you use a bluer green, it tends to push it into the background. So let's see how we do here. I'm just going to turn my board, being a left-hander. I just want a nice softness in there, but I'll add some specks of green of a darker colour. Now I'm leaving some of those white edges as well. Those will be my highlights. A bit more blue. It's always nice if you just vary the mix. And the surplus paint you can just drag off onto the side. If you leave paint on the border, like on here, as the paper flattens down again, you'll find that this will bleed back into your painting and you'll be left with a hard line. I don't know if you can see one forming just there. So there's a couple of things you can do about that. One is always to wipe round the border. So just with some tissue. Need to be fairly accurate with this. You don't really want to be affecting what's happening on the paper. So that's one way of doing it. Or you can use a brush just with capillary action. If it's here, for instance, just drag some shapes from it. Do a little bit of lifting off. When you do lifting off, you've got to. What happens is if you lift off, your paint is collecting the pigment from the paper. But if you carry on, it's now soaked with the pigment. So you've got to make sure that you wash your brush again, and then you'll be able to get back to those lifting off. So you've got to keep washing your brush in between each. I'll do the hint of a stem coming down the middle that will appear and disappear. So for that I'll mix quite a strong green. And let's have it coming in here. And I'll get reappearing there, and here. Again, it's just a suggestion. And then we'll just soften this edge. On this area just here, you'll see that there's a hard edge forming. And you've got to do what they call keeping a wet edge, so I'm going to go into that quite quickly. It's a bit like if you've ever painted your living room and stopped for lunch halfway along a wall. Just going to wash this away now. Just want it to disappear into a kind of vignette-y look, making it paler. Touch some of that pink, which bleed a little. I'm just going to add some dark in here. This is the darker side of right in the bottom of the plants. There's usually very little light gets in there. And also, if you just touch, you'll find you get that lovely contrast between the lights and the darks. And it's the lights and the darks called counter change. Excuse me. One of my favourite techniques is to splash as well. And you can do this with water or you can do it with pigment. If you do it with water, you'll end up with little cauliflowers, which is quite a nice effect for foliage. Going a bit darker with that. If you splash onto your flowers, you can either leave them because it adds to the effect, or you can lift them off with tissue. You can see that I've splashed down the border, so I'm just conscious that that doesn't bleed back in. I'll just give that a wipe. And I've left myself there. We've got a natural break there because the flower goes right to the top of the paper. So I'm going to let that dry now before I start on the next one. So I'll be back in a moment. While this wash is still wet, I've just strengthened down here a little bit. I was looking a bit weak, but you can also press out some leaf shapes. Just keep changing the shape of your tissue. Down some of those. And that'll do for now. Okay, so welcome back. I did a little bit more splashing while you were away. So here's where we're at the moment. So it's the same procedure for the others. So I'm going to, first of all, wet this all over in a kind of vertical way. Just at the top, I want to make sure that this flower is not as tall as this one. It's always better if you vary the sizes of things in your painting. So I'll start this one here. Getting a small brush just for these top flowers. Excuse me. I'm going to vary the colour of this one. I'm going to go for kind of white flowers. If you look on this painting, sorry, on the photograph here, this one goes from white to a very delicate kind of lilac colour. So I'm going to try and do that. This is a dish of, it's called caput mortem. You can mix caput mortem if it's not available in your particular colour range, by mixing vermilion with ultramarine blue. And this paint really granulates really nicely on this Bockingford paper. Give that a little mix. This wants to be really weak. So it's a white flower, so all we're really doing is adding shadows. So it wants to be very pale, just a very pale grey. So I'll start with my top flowers. Same procedure, just kind of dragging downwards. This paint's contaminated, it's got a bit of dust in it, so I'm going to start again with this one. Literally just mop it up with a tissue. We do get a bit of sand in the air from the beach here, and sometimes it contaminates my paints. So I'll just start that one again. So a nice clean dish to start with. Spray with water. That's better. Nice clean pigment. We don't need any help from contaminants. It's very pale, a little more. So it's the same procedure. I'm going for these basic kind of bell shapes. It's always nice to vary the size as well. So I'm not going to do these flowers as big as the other ones, otherwise there'll be competition. A nice sideways drag. And what's happening is, as the flowers are getting further down, I'm taking a bit more care, so less with the side of the brush and more with the point of it. And it's about here that I want to be changing to this really delicate lilac. So I'm going to make this a lot weaker. So So this was the one that we used for the centres of the other flowers. So now we're on to 0.1 skinny milk. And I'll change my brush too. I'm just going to introduce a little bit of pink into these, sorry, lilac into these, the grey of this, so it doesn't change suddenly from one colour to another. So we're basically going for that same kind of bell shape. You'll notice that on this one I didn't pre-wet the bottom of the paper, so we're getting a nice combination of dry edges on this particular one. So I'll just mix that up a little bit and we'll just give the bottom a spray. You'll see things will start to bleed more now. I'll go back to my medium round. And what I'm doing is I'm gradually going to make this darker as we come down towards the bottom. So just mixing a little more pigment in each time. That's a blob. You don't need that. And because this one stopped higher up, I'm actually going to bring this one a little lower down. In fact, I think we might go to the bottom with this one. And I'm dragging into that other paint as well. That's pretty dry at the moment. So I'm using a kind of downward sweep with the side of the brush. Trying to avoid a pattern, always difficult to do in nature. And we'll have this one disappearing off the bottom there. And now I'm going to use some tissue to lift out those areas at the bottom. It's about 40 degrees here and the golden time is literally minutes. You can see I've only just painted this and I'm struggling to lift off now. Obviously the air conditioning doesn't help. But I ain't turning it off. And now I'll put a bit more darks into the centre of some of these flowers. Again, mixing my caput mortem a little darker. I'm just trying to define where the inside of these flowers are. What happens is if you add a weaker mix to one that's already there, so if this paint that I was putting on was darker, weaker in strength than the wash that's already on there, that's when you end up with a cauliflower. And let's have some of those. We'll drag some veins coming out of this particular type of flower. This is just with a moist brush and just dragging that paint down. And it should give that kind of trumpet effect. You don't have to do them all, just a suggestion. What we're trying to do is to leave something to the imagination for the viewer, for them to fill in the missing pieces. And while that's still wet, I'll strengthen some of these. don't know how I ended up with a nail art brush in my kit, but I think it was from my nieces in years gone by. So then I'll do just the same higher up. I may just switch to some purple. I'm trying to go from this transition of white flowers to purple flowers. And then while that's still wet, back to my greens. I'm going to do a wet into wet background on this. You can see how it's still swollen up from when I wet it earlier. So it's cockling is the paper, so it will shrink back down into my green. And I'm holding the brush very near the end, I don't know if you can see. And if you do that, you end up not fiddling, you end up with a much looser painting. Vary the colour as you work down. Let's have a darker one here. Mixing it even darker now. Let's have a bit more blue. You'll find that you get all sorts of kind of happy accidents. Let's have a suggestion of a stem coming through here, which gets darker as we get lower down. This, when the paper buckles, obviously we were quite fortunate with this paper, but if you end up with an area like this where it's buckled here, it's still buckled here, and if you don't do something about that, you end up with a stripy painting. So I'll be coming back to that area quite soon. So all I'm doing is reverse painting around these flowers and getting some connection between the two. Again, I'm not too fastidious about where the light's coming from today, which is unusual for me, but there you go. And I'm making it even darker now. We get down to the bottom, reverse paint around some of these, and just wash this down. And I'll just wet this edge so it disappears. And now we need to address this area. So the best way of doing it is just with a sideways sweep and just sweep the paint off the paper, and then it won't dry in the stripe. I like to let my paintings dry naturally, depending on if it's a very tight work you're doing, then using a hairdryer is good, but if it's quite a loose wet into wet style like this, it's always nice to let it dry naturally, because what's happening is, as it's drying, there's still things happening on the page which are pretty magical. And if you dry them with a hairdryer, all you do is stop that process in its tracks. So if it's a very detailed work that you're working on, then you can do that. But this is quite a loose kind of style. And then while that's still wet, let's have some of those little details. So again, this is wet into wet. Where you've got a dry area, you get a hard edge, and where you've got a wet area, you get a soft edge. And it's the combination of both of them that actually adds to the beauty of this type of painting. Got some pinks as well. If you don't like something, just wipe it off. more work down here. Let's have some more of those spots in this area. These are actually still very wet, as you can see. And what happens is, if you've got a wet area, it all softens and bleeds in. And it's a combination of soft and hard that makes the painting. Just a little harsh here. So let's just soften that, moist brush. And just lose some of that. And then we'll let that dry naturally. While this wash is still slightly damp, spraying with a toothbrush with either water or paint will encourage very tiny cauliflowers. And if you drop a big blob of paint on, say from a paintbrush, you get a big cauliflower. But add to these organic shapes that you get in nature. Spent 6 years teaching how not to do cauliflowers, and now I use them all the time. There is a danger when the shine is still on the paper. If you can see that, it's certainly buckled. If you continue to work, and the reason I mention it is I was tempted to fiddle with it then. And what happens is, if you end up doing that, you end up with a real muddy painting. And if your paintings are ever looking dirty, then either you've accidentally mixed 3 primary colours together, which always make a muddy brown colour, or you've ignored the drying time. In my book I call it the golden time. And it's basically, if you fiddle after the shine's gone off the paper, it looks worse and worse the more you fiddle with it. Here's me fiddling. See, it's addictive. Hi there, welcome back. Bit of a battery issue there, I had to recharge the camera, so the angle might have changed slightly. Okay, so what we need to do now is we need to try and establish, both from lifting out, which we did just there with a flat brush, with this one, and it's basically just to get the shapes back. Because everything looks a bit fuzzy and out of focus. So just rub away with a flat brush, just squeeze between my fingers, and then you can almost get back to white paper. The more vertical you use the brush, the finer the line. So we're just trying to get some of these shapes back now. This one's got completely lost, so let's get that one back. And this one. If the brush is too dry, it doesn't work very quickly. And then just dab it with tissue and you get those shapes back. And then to further emphasise that, let's use the enemy of the watercolour painter, white gouache. Shock horror. And when I use my white gouache, I usually store it upside down, and I always use it from the lid, and that way the whole pot doesn't get contaminated with another colour. This is a sit-down jobby. The rest of the painting was done stood up, and I'm just going to refer to my book, and we're going to get some of these shapes back. And I'm just dragging with this nail brush back up into the flower, and then we'll just define the top edge with a really fine line. I'm just going to continue with that with each one of these flowers. And you can see that there's lovely areas where you have happy accidents, like here for instance, and try not to lose them. It's real tempting to just paint over them, but broken lines are good. And just drag upwards. The side of the brush is great for this. The difference between gouache is very similar to, it's kind of, I guess it started life as, if you like, poster paint for graphic designers. But you can use a lot of the techniques with that you also can use with watercolours. You can lift off gouache. You can't lift off either acrylic or gesso. So I like to use a combination of gesso and gouache and watercolour. Bit of a senior moment there. Getting a bit engrossed here. So this one is completely lost, so let's find this one again. And just vary those shapes. The bottom lip has a white area, so I'm just dragging up into this flower. So I won't bore you with the whole of this, because basically I'm going to define a lot of these flowers now, so I'll switch off the video and come back when I've completed this flower here.
I'll zoom in on just one of these flowers so you can see exactly what's going on.
Okay. So to get a shape back that's lost, it's just a very fine line. Let's say this one here. So we're just going to highlight the edge. And we'll also drag up from the bottom. It kind of goes milky, does gouache when it's mixed with water, which is nice. And then here we're going to strengthen the inside shape. So this is just with caput mortuum. I'm just adding dark directly underneath, as if it was shadow. I'm just softening this edge in places. Just a word of warning here, if you use the same water with your gouache and then use watercolour with it, it turns all your paints opaque. So it's as well to just concentrate on one or the other first. So having said that, I'm ignoring those rules. I'm using a combination here of the caput mortuum and some indigo. Indigo is quite dark, it's quite nice if you mix it with caput mortuum. I'm going really carefully up to this white line and then just soften it in the direction of, and then you get that lovely combination of hardness and softness. And then to finish the flowers off, we've got really strong kind of purple paint now. Almost neat paint right from the side of the dish. And this is where we add those little dots. Let's make that a little stronger. And while it's still wet you get a softness, and when it's dry, so this one's soft and this one's dry, and then let's just moisten some of those so it blends in a bit more. Just do another one. Let's do this one here. Again, trying to vary the shape so it doesn't look samey. Go very dark with that one now. And we'll just soften that bottom edge. This is a technique I use when I'm doing anything that's curved. And then the stamen sticking out. This time we'll go for Caput Mortem. I know that area of gouache there is quite dry. And that's it, just keep working your way towards a finished painting. Down here, using different water now. I feel that the painting needs some strength down in this bottom corner. So I'm going to strengthen this. So it makes it a much darker green now.
Just zoom out so you can see this.
So now I'm going to strengthen here, reverse painting around and just dragging the brush. And if I keep changing the direction of the brush, I just want to soften this top edge. So it's just a moist brush so it blends with the rest. But you can see now by strengthening this area here, the flowers are starting to stand out more. And I'm leaving some highlights in there just so it looks like the sun's catching some leaves. Dipped in the wrong jug. And then just lift out the odd light area with a sponge. And this just gives a softer shape than all those hard edges. And I think we're getting there. So there we are, a bit more work, bit of splashing. Just to sharpen up the details. And splash with a bit of water for a few more cauliflowers. And I think we're done. Thank you for watching. I don't know if it looks anything like this, but who cares? It's only art. Bye for now. Thanks for watching, and please feel free to comment, like and subscribe to my channel. Thanks very much. Bye bye. See you next time.